Wow, what an NBA playoff experience we've had so far. And I think it's best if I go and recap both what happened in the first round because some of those rounds were pretty dramatic. And then we get into the second round because there was a lot of craziness going on there. As we could see a very interesting playoffs unfold for the NBA. Keep in mind that both the MLB and NFL playoffs last year were lackluster. I'm not going to get too much into that, but in the MLB, the wild card series, you had one good series, Mets Brewers. In the NLDS, two series went the full distance. The other two did go to 4 games out of 5, so that's pretty good. The NLCS went 6 and the ALCS went 5, so it's not great. And the World Series only went 5. In the NFL, in the wild card round, only one game was close. Commanders Bucks. I guess Eagles Packers. You know, the Eagles were at times you felt threatened. Divisional round, Eagles Rams and Bills Ravens were good games, and Commanders Lions and Chiefs Texans certainly weren't horrible, but they weren't great. The AFC Championship game was good. The NFC Championship game was a bloodbath, and the Super Bowl was a bloodbath. So this actually has potential to be a good playoff run so far. Well, but we'll see. First of all, Cleveland-Miami was a boring series as it was a sweep, but we'll get why into it was a boring series. The Celtics beat the Magic in 5, so that's not great. The Knicks actually had a competitive series against the Pistons that went to 6. Pacers series against the Bucks, I mean, it came down to the wire, but ultimately it was a 5-game series. The West is where a lot of our gems were. Now, the T-Wolves beat the Lakers in 5, and the Thunder beat the Grizzlies in a sweep, so that's not great. But you had 2 series that went the full distance. The Clippers losing to the Nuggets, and the Rockets losing to the Warriors. So looking at it, again, these weren't great series. Knicks-Pistons, though, again, the Knicks had a big comeback. In the fourth. They had a big comeback in the fourth of game 1 to win it. But then they could not win. Then they could not win game 2. Then it took a 3-1 series lead by winning 2 in Detroit. Again, another big fourth quarter comeback in game 3. And also in game 4? Wait, I can't tell. Pistons win game 5 at Street to force a game 6, but then in eerily similar fashion to the Sixers, they lose a heartbreaking game 6 at home, and the Knicks win in 6 again. And again, no. Need the playoffs. And again, what you have to understand is that in both cases, they were both, very close games. Very close and competitive series. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. And look, I'm happy for the Pistons, seeing as, they may have lost, but their season was a success. I mean, the Pistons came into this year with no expectations after being the worst team in basketball the year before, not even having a number 1 overall pick. They were down to 5, and the Pistons still found a way to make it to the playoffs as a 6th seed. So even though they may have lost the Knicks, there's a lot of hope and positivity coming around, and they played them close too. They played them close. The Knicks needed a late surge in order to beat the Pistons in Game 6. They Pistons seemingly made a huge comeback, only for them to blow it. Looking at Game 4, we saw again, the Knicks take a big lead at the start, only for the Pistons to, in the fourth have a big lead, only for them to blow it. In game three, we saw um, we didn't really see the Pistons taking too much of a lead, to be fair, but it still wound up being close. Game one was the biggest bloodbath, and even then, the Pistons had leads into the fourth, so even that wasn't a foregone conclusion. Like really, all those games were close, and the series itself was close. So you've got to tip your cap to the Pacers. It was a good fight. Also, I shall note that in that the Pacers, had a game winner with 1.1 seconds left. And and with the Pacers, like they had that game was overtime. They hit the game winner when no one thought they were going to, but it still doesn't mean it was a great game just because like it was a game five. It wasn't a game seven. Again, in the West, this was a bloodbath. I mean, none of these games were even really close. None of these games were even really close, except for the final game, which was close. Rockets Warriors. This was a good series. Though Golden State had a 3-1 lead, only for the series to get tied. However, the Warriors did prevail in Game 7 and by a lot too. Um, T-Wolves Lakers wasn't a great series, but Nuggets Clippers. I mean, Game 1 went to overtime. Game 2 was close. Game 4 was close. Like no team ever had more than a one-game lead in this series, and even though the Game 7 wasn't great, like it still went 7. But what's even more shocking is that the Pacers have a 2-0 lead on the Cavaliers right now. Um, close games, but and we saw, despite showing by 20 points in the third, Pacers come back and they take the lead. And the Knicks are similar, trailing through 20 in the third quarter and winning game one in overtime. And then they did this again in game two. So, we're seeing both these series that everyone was saying it was going to be Cavaliers and Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals, and now it's like not so much because both those teams are down 0-2. Now I'm not saying they can't come back from an 0-2 deficit. Actually, last year New York had a 2-0 lead in the semis, and they still couldn't hold on and win the series as they wound up losing in 7 to the Pacers, but we'll see how this goes because they also won 2 games on the road. They're gonna have home field advantage after this. And like the craziest thing to me is that the Knicks, if the Knicks wind up winning, this might be the biggest upset in New York sports history since the 1969 upsets of the Jets and Mets over the Baltimore teams. Because just looking at it, the the Knicks could not beat a single game against the Celtics in the regular season. Everyone had them losing. I think they had like plus 590 odds to win the series, and that was that. And now they're actually up 2-0. So it's actually plausible that the Knicks wind up winning. Again, like at points, I get that the Knicks, in game one, had to lead in the fourth and then they blew it, but they wound up winning in overtime. But there's a point where the Celtics had like a 98.3% chance to win, up 20, and then game two. Another huge comeback for the Knicks. The Celtics at one point, I think they had a 99% chance of winning when they were up 20, and and the Knicks wound up coming back to win the series. And now it's like, and now it's like this could actually happen. And honestly, if the Knicks do beat the Celtics, I would say that's a bigger upset than Super Bowl 42. I'd say that. I mean, Super Bowl 42 wasn't even the craziest Super Bowl upset of the decade when you look at it, because Super Bowl 36 was even a crazier upset than that. And like, I would still say that that because it's a 7 game series, that the Knicks pull this off, it's a bigger upset. And then Pacers Cavs, like you look at this game, and Cavaliers consistently had the better odds of winning this one. At one point, 97.7% chance of a Cavaliers victory, up 20, just for them to wind up choking it on a game winning 3-point shot that was maybe the most clutch shot in Pacers history. And game one, the Pacers actually win comfortably. Pacers, um, Pacers, win this one comfortably. Don't really have too much trouble in this game, but game two was obviously a huge struggle, and that's the thing. And then look at the second round and the other games that they have there, and like the Nuggets actually shocked the Thunder in game one with a comeback victory. To take a 1-0 lead. Now they got squashed in game two. But the series is still tied. So, Thunder saying they were going to win, not so fast. Golden State is leading the Wolves 1-0. And again, it will be pretty impressive either way what happens, considering that both of these teams are pretty lowly ranked. But we're guaranteed to have a 6 or a 7 in the Western Conference Finals. And and Eastern Conference Finals, we could see two monumental upsets. Like the three best teams in the NBA very well could lose in the second round, especially Cavs and Celtics. No, my face cam doesn't work. Maybe it reset. So that's the craziest thing. Like this series, this could really go any way. Here's the other thing I want to emphasize. In a lot of these cases, like it wasn't really close. Like Cavs Celtics, obviously 3-game difference, that was gonna be close. The Knicks, who were the 3 seed, they were 10 games behind the Celtics, and the Pacers were 14 games behind the Cavaliers. So these are much worse teams that are actually getting the job done. Now nobody's surprised the Heat, a team that was 37-45 and was actually the 10th best team, but won 2 play-in games. No one's surprised they got squashed by the Cavs. They were 27 games back. But it's just something to note that, like, Cavs are struggling, Celtics are struggling. These teams may be more fraudulent than we think. And, looking at the Western Conference, again, like, the Thunder, 16 games ahead of anyone else. They were 18 games ahead of the Nuggets, as you had this cluster here, and very well could wind up, still seeing very well could wind up seeing, an interesting scenario there. And what also is interesting is that the Grizzlies were only 20 games on the Thunder. Now, as they got squashed. But, like, here's what you have to understand. Like, I was always high on the Rockets doing good, especially because of the Warriors, being a 7 seed. I didn't realize that the two were only 2 games apart. Like, I'm not even kidding. Rockets won 52 games, and then the Lakers won 50, Nuggets won 50, Clippers won 50, T-Wolves won 49, Warriors won 48, Grizzlies won 48. It was tight in the West, the same way that it was last year, especially in the East. And we'll look at comparison at that. Like, there was no chance the Kings or Mavericks really had a chance because they were both losing records and 8 to 9 games back of the other teams. In the East, it wasn't as big of a cluster, and it was certainly a lot worse, but you had 2 teams with 64 and 61 wins, and then the next best team wins 51 games, and that's just what happened. And when I compared to 2023, 2024, I sort of mean that because the Celtics won 64 games and were 14 ahead of the Knicks. So you had that, but then you had the Knicks at 50, the Bucks at 49, Cavaliers at 48, and then the Magic, Pacers, Sixers at 47 apiece, and then the Heat at 46, and then the next two teams that were also at losing records. That's why I make the comparison, because in all these cases, you had all these teams that were so close to each other. West was also jam-packed last year, a lot more competitive. 46-win teams wound up missing it in the play-in. The Rockets actually won 41 games last year, but they were only the 11th seed. Again, highly competitive last year, and that's another point I want to emphasize. Like, we're seeing better teams make it into the playoffs, so we're seeing these playoffs, I think, get a little bit better. So, again, my predictions, at this point, I'm actually going to take the Knicks and the Pacers to win their series. Like, winning 2 on the road, they've done the hardest job. If they can defend their home court, they'll win. Even if they lose one at home, they'll still win. Have them both winning 6. I do think that the Thunder do beat the Nuggets, though. I think that Game 1 was more of a fluke, and Game 2 sort of proves that. I get that the Nuggets do get to go back to Denver, and this is a very dangerous team, but remember how the Nuggets flopped last year to the T-Wolves. So I would not take anything for granted. Plus, if it comes down to Game 7, that is in Oklahoma City. And T-Wolves Warriors, I'm probably going to take the Warriors on this one. And then, let's see if we can make a bracket. I can't. And then for the, after that, I am going to take the Pacers over the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals, based both on what happened last year and based on the Pacers that have a deeper playoff experience by obviously making it to the ECF last year, even if it did result in a sweep to the Celtics. The Knicks lost to the Pacers, so we have that. I want to look up the 2024 NBA playoffs. We saw that the Pacers beat the Knicks in 7 and then got swept by the Celtics, but I do think that the Pacers would beat the Knicks and advance to the finals. As far as, Thunder Warriors, we haven't really seen that. The Warriors didn't make the playoffs last year. The Thunder did, but they lost in 6 to the Mavericks. It's going to be an interesting series, but I do think that the Thunder, being the better team, is going to win. I do think Thunder beat the Pacers, but I think Pacers do make the NBA Finals. They lose, but they do make it, I think.